Hey guys, John here. Do me a quick favor. Go over to Good Pods, go to Apple Podcasts, go to wherever you guys get your podcast from, and rate us over there wherever you guys get your podcast from. I have Zoe here. Zoe and I are actually going to be reviewing Candyman. This is a long awaited review that I've been wanting to do for a while. So let's go on ahead. Let's get started. Hey, how are you doing, Zoe?
Howdy, how you feeling?
I'm feeling great, man. Having a little bit of difficulties, but you know how it goes when it comes down to podcasting. So it's good to be able to talk about a little bit of Candyman with you. It's good to have you on the show for the very first time. If you, in case anybody wants to know, tell everybody about your podcast.
Well, my podcast is the Backlick Cinema Podcast, and what we do is we, that meaning myself and my son, we're bonding over movies. So I like to introduce him to movies that I love when I was growing up in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. We bond over those movies, we talk about it, and then on the podcast, I talk about what both me and Zach loved about the movie that we watched.
That's always a great thing to be able to bond amongst each other, especially introducing a new generation to movies that we grew up on and everything too. So that's always a plus side to actually growing somebody.
Right, right.
So with that being said, let's go on ahead. Let's get into our main event, if you will. But yeah, this movie is called Candyman. Of course, this starts out is also came out in 1992. This is actually hands down one of my favorite urban legend horror films that came out in 1992. And it stars, of course, Tony Todd as the Candyman. And I already probably said it more than 5 times in front of a mirror just now. So, but still, I love this movie because of the urban legend, because of the mythology behind Candyman, and also, too, the horror element inside of it. And of course, you have Helen, who's trying to investigate everything that happened within the projects of this movie and trying to figure out if this is actually fact or if it's actually fiction. And the fact, too, that you're also having Helen, who's also trying to balance her college career along with her boyfriend that she's with. So, what do you think of the introduction of Helen?
I think it's pretty cool. So the movie opens. She's interviewing somebody about the urban legend. So what I was immediately impressed by was the fact that it's set up as an urban legend. It's not all that similar to other horror movies. So where it's like basically the horror springs upon them. This is something that is kind of known but not really talked about or well documented in the community. So she's interviewing different people about what they know about the urban legend. And I think at this point in the beginning, that's how she's investigating it. I don't think that she's investigating as a real life event. I think she's collecting information for her thesis on urban
Thesis.
legends. I'm getting it out.
It's
Her
all good.
thesis on urban legends.
But yeah, that's exactly what she's doing. She's trying to collect information on her thesis for her college degree, and that's something that I really liked was the fact that she's interviewing somebody to find out more information about the Candyman behind this whole entire investigation. And of course, you wind up seeing where basically Helen does wind up going over into the projects to investigate it because everybody said, "Oh, the Candyman lives here." And so Helen goes on ahead and investigates it over there with her friend.
Right. And one of the things that kind of struck me about Helen is that she gave me real Scully vibes. It's like almost immediately, I was like, oh, that's a lot like Scully from the X-Files.
Exactly. That's actually a good way of actually putting it. It does have this X-Files kind of flavor to it in a way where it's kind of a detective kind of movie, but it's at the same time that it's not really a detective if you think about it because of the fact that she's writing something on her thesis paper, but it does have that kind of X-Files kind of flavor to it. So I definitely like how you
Right.
put it into that perspective because I never heard of that in that perspective before. So
Yeah. Yeah, she
and
reminds me
yeah.
of if Scully were like more like Mulder in a way.
I can definitely see that. And of course, I also like it when Helen's hearing the story of the Candyman, and then of course, everybody goes for the bad boy types, and then this urban legend, she tells the boyfriend to go upstairs. She has a present for him, and then you wind up seeing her uh, saying Candyman 4 times, but then she sends him back downstairs and tells him to wait. And then he winds up, so of course she winds up getting slaughtered upstairs, and you see the blood dripping down. Then of course the boyfriend's freaked out and he leaves.
Oh yeah,
So yeah,
wisely.
yeah. Trust me, if I saw blood dripping down from my roof from my ceiling, I think I would leave too. To be
Uh,
honest with you,
Also, yeah. So this, you're describing the actual the story that's being told to Helen. So this is
right?
kind
And
of a flashback, but this is like just a story. This is not an event that somebody has actually witnessed. So, but did you recognize the boyfriend in that scene?
no, I didn't.
Yeah, because I was looking at him and he was bothering me because I was like, I've seen this dude before. And it can be distracting when you see somebody you recognize and you can't immediately place them. So that is Ted Raimi. You probably seen him on Xena Warrior Princess
Oh
and a bunch
wow,
of other
okay.
projects. Yeah, yeah. So and it's funny, right? Because he's always every time I've ever any other time I've seen him or remember seeing him, he's always played like a cowardly type. But in this role, he's the cool boyfriend. He has a black leather jacket. He's got like the Fonz uh vibes coming off of him. So I was like, oh my god, it's Ted Raimi as a cool kid. And it's funny, it's before I knew who Ted Raimi was. He was just like an extra in the movie the first time I saw it. So yeah, yeah, that was a Ted Raimi. What's his name? Raimi's brother, as as the
Sam
cool kid.
Raimi, yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
So I definitely like the fact that you have someone that we're not even that we grew up on that we never knew that who he was until now, which I thought that was actually pretty cool.
right.
But this is another thing too is they also visit the scene of a murder where Helen discovers a room where offerings had been left for the Candyman. Afterwards, they meet the victim's neighbor, which is Anne Marie McCoy, a single mother raising her infant son Anthony. And of course, the way that's played into that narrative is the fact I like how she goes into this in this complex, and she opens up the mirror, and then behind that mirror, there's actually a secret passageway that's going into it. So I definitely like how they have the mythology there, even though it's somebody else that's just ripping off the Candyman name, trying to scare people,
Yeah,
just so that way he can get what he wants.
yeah, where she goes into that abandoned apartment and she moves the bathroom mirror because in the original tales that she's heard, the you say the Candyman's name in the mirror 3 times, and it's almost always a bathroom mirror, and next thing you know, somebody is murdered. So her theory is that if there are kernels of truth in the story, then that means the killer probably came in through an actual bathroom mirror. Not that he came through the mirror itself, but they pushed the mirror out the way. It's like the mirror slash medicine cabinet. He pushed it through the wall and crawled in from the other apartment and crawled into the victim's apartment and killed the victim. And this is actually kind of based on things that have actually happened because these apartments were built so cheaply that either your room was directly adjacent across from somebody else's bathroom, or there was very little space between yours and somebody's bathroom, and somebody figured that out and they pulled out their mirror and pushed in your mirror and crawled through the opening that I created and caused all types of havoc. So
Which actually makes sense though from that standpoint because it's more of she's trying to deny the fact that Candyman even exists as well. So that's also what pisses off Candyman even more is the fact that he's not being taken seriously, which is also why he even goes after Helen
right,
as
he
well.
wants or she there's enough of her because his whole existence is dependent on belief in him. So this
Hmm.
is what you call it. One of the themes of this movie was like belief or like literary tales and those sorts of things. So he requires somebody to believe in him in order to exist. So he's constantly telling Helen to believe in him, right? Let me allow be my victim for me, right?
And the dude has like bees all over him, and and then of course he winds up abducting her, and then you know. But the story with every Candyman movie is there has to be a survivor that tells the story. Otherwise, there's no one else to actually tell the story. So he winds up framing the victim. And so it was to be Helen is actually the victim of this crime that she winds up doing, which happens to be back over to Anne's place. And she sees a dog being basically blood all over the place. She's freaked out. I would be freaked out too. And basically, she supposedly chopped off the dog's head with a cleaver. And that scene right there was really bloody. And I was actually very grotesque. And I remember as a kid seeing that and just being freaked out over it because of the fact of how gruesome that scene is.
What's crazy is that I seen this movie. I want to say I seen it at a school. At first, I thought I seen it in high school, and I matched like, how are they showing this to high school kids? And it couldn't have been because this came out in 1992. So I was going to college by then, so I had to watch it in a college classroom. But still, how a bunch of young kids watching this movie? But
You see,
yeah, yeah. And
my
then
mom rented this movie for me because I wanted
mm,
to see.
yeah,
But
I
go on.
wasn't. I was just saying I wasn't certain if like right now, like after the rewatch, I'm not even certain if it was this movie I seen or maybe it was a sequel that I seen because there's a scene that I remember seeing from something called Candyman where you actually see the actual um a depiction of what happened with the Candyman. You see Tony Todd being dragged through the fields, captured by some I don't know, captured by some people who believe that he's trying to rape this white woman. So he's a bunch of villagers
That's
got him.
that's part two. Farewell to the
That's part
flesh.
two. So that's the one I saw then, because then you see the bees covering him and screaming for help, and and so I remember that. So maybe I didn't see this movie after all, and I saw Candyman too.
Hey, that's okay though. Farewell to the Flesh is actually a pretty good one. Once you get into part three, forget it. I didn't really care for part three at all. But
Right.
the first two are always going to be classics to me to begin with. So but another thing I want to mention is too how much of a douchebag her husband actually is to her as well, because of the fact that you can definitely tell that he's over there trying to sleep with the students and trying to get in their pants, and also too trying to act like that him and Helen are not even together whenever they are together on a husband and wife relationship whenever she does go over there and see him. So it's like a very awkward thing to have your wife in your class or or whenever she visits him in his classroom. But still, that's your wife, dude. You need to go on ahead and show her some affection, even though that you have students inside the classroom.
Well, I can understand him not showing affection in the classroom. That'd be
Right.
kind of awkward. Not that's everybody's not all touchy feely in the classroom. But what's interesting is that like this is near the very beginning of the movie. So she sees right away that he's eyeballing this one particular student, right? So she catches that right away, and she probably because they got together while she was still a student. She was probably a student in his classroom because she's a doctoral candidate and he's a college professor. So it that he she can see the same patterns how he's coming how he had came on to her. He can see him coming on to or making googly eyes at his other female students. So she's kind of questioning him like she's not like direct questions but the way she's looking at him like questioning them and he's answering verbally saying, oh, I'm not cheating on you, right? He doesn't say exactly that, but that's the vibe he gives off. I'm not cheating at all.
Right? He wasn't saying, Helen, how could you think that I'm cheating on you with her? She's twice as young as I am. What makes you think that I have any kind of feelings for her? Is basically what he's saying. And basically on the outside, he's like, yeah, I am definitely cheating on you, but
Right,
I'm going to
right,
play it off like I'm not.
right.
But
And we see
yeah.
that kind of bear out later on in the movie.
Then also, too, I like how you see the other professor who's obsessed with Candyman and starts talking about the urban legend, and Helen's over there recording him, and she's just sink line and sinker with it. But at the same time, you also have the husband who's also insulting her at the same time as the professor's actually talking to her about this urban legend.
Right, that's the scene where they're at dinner with the
Yep.
professor, and she's a little bit arrogant, like because he says that she says, "I'm going to bury you." He's like, "You're going to bury me? You don't even know the story. Let me tell you." And because she doesn't know about the actual origins of the Candyman myth, about how he was a slave, well, he was a freedman during a time of slavery, and he got accused of improprieties with a white woman, and he got captured by the villagers, and they chopped off his hand, and they poured honey on him and had bees sing. I can't remember. It's getting all fuzzy at that point.
Yeah,
Anyway,
they
he's a
they
tortured
chop off his
soul.
hand. They also put honey on his chest to make the bees come after him, and then of course he winds up dying, and that's how he becomes the Candyman. Yeah, you got that.
Also, there was something else that they also include. They didn't really explore it anymore in this movie, but she finds candy with razor blades in them, and that also has something to do with not the particular legend of this Candyman, but basically of candies. hurting children when they go out trick or treating.
Well, that was actually explored a little bit whenever you saw the gangster trying to act like he's Candyman when he's not Candyman. He's just some guy who's trying to use the name to scare people in that neighborhood. And of course, that's when Helen first gets her introduction into that character. Then she winds up getting knocked out, and then she winds up going over to the police station.
Right, right. And it was weird that that part was kind of weird because it seemed like he attacked her for no reason. Because like she's looking for the Candyman, but she's not looking for an actual man. And then he shows up and is like, "Yeah, I heard you looking for the Candyman." And knocks her out. I was like, first of all, why? What's the point of attacking her? If you wanted to remain hidden, you could have just stayed hidden. Like she was never going to find you. And the other thing is like, well, if you were going to attack her, you might as well hit you because she can identify you. That was like crime 101. Don't leave any witnesses. And he left a witness, so that doesn't make any sense. So I don't know.
Well,
He's just a dumb criminal, I guess.
he is a dumb criminal, but at the same time, it's like, okay, so you're going to come knocking on my door. So if you keep on knocking on my door, someone's going to answer. So I might as well answer this person. And plus, with her being a white woman, being in a black neighborhood, rough neighborhood at that, she sticks out like a sore thumb. So basically, he's also telling her, look, you need to step off out of our neighborhood and go back to where you came from, too. So that's what I got out of it, though, too, sending a message to Helen.
Yeah,
But
I mean, yeah, yeah. I get that, but I still feel
it's
like
just very misplaced, though.
yeah, I mean, you it's one thing to intimidate somebody and says, "Don't come around here no more," and the other thing, just knock them out. I feel like that was a bad move. Like, you just do the regular intimidation, like wave a gun around or a knife, boo, and surround her with people and push her out of the neighborhood. Do it that way, but don't not assault. No,
Not
don't
a
do that.
hook.
You gotta you gotta go all the way. You can't go halfway. You can't do half measures in this type of thing. You want to commit crime, you got to do crime 101 all the way. You just this half measures is not. And then you see what happened. He hit her. She goes to believe the police identify. Well, they gather all people that kind of look like him in a lineup. His voice is very distinctive. She's able to identify him just by listening to him. And then he gets sent to jail. It's like that was now you feel smart, don't you? Now you're in jail because you assaulted a woman and you didn't finish the job. I'm an advocate for proper criminal conduct. I mean, I'm not. This is not something I would do myself,
But
mind you.
just
But
to our
there's a
listeners,
way that
I
you
am
do.
not responsible for what Joe says.
Yeah. Now, I'm not advocating for violence by any means, but still, if you're going to do
Be
it,
smart. Be smart.
yeah, be smart about it. That's all I'm asking.
But yeah, I definitely have to agree. It is kind of stupid, especially how she is able to identify him in a lineup. And like you said, he has that very extinct voice. So it's like, how do you not know that's him or anything like that? Because he has
Right.
that deep voice, raspy
Right.
voice.
Oh, also,
So
the other thing about it was that his whole thing was not being found, and his actions led to him directly being found. Just counterintuitive.
right, because he was supposed to be this urban legend as well in this ghetto neighborhood, and then all of a sudden this white woman just shows up, and then she's like, "Okay, well, I guess what? I'm just gonna go in and show up myself now. Now my urban legend is gone."
Right. Right.
So, so there goes the intimidation. But it does play off the narrative later on in the reboot of the film, which is not that great of a film, but I appreciate what they tried to do with it. But as far as this goes, though, I liked how she winds up finally saying Helen finally winds up saying the words, and she's in that dark parking lot, and she's looking at the slides that her friend gave her, and then that's when Candyman actually shows up out of the blue and tells her to be his victim.
Oh yeah, was that the part when she gets a closer look at one of the slides and she can see his silhouette?
Yeah, she
Yeah,
can see
that
his silhouette. Yep.
they gave me very what's that movie? The movie with Harrison Ford, Blade Runner, gave me very Blade Runner vibes. She was like enhanced on her slides, and slides don't actually enhance, but it was still fun.
It was fun to actually go through that progression of seeing how the slides kept on going until you actually saw the silhouette to where it gives you that creepiness. So I thought that they executed it well, but like you said, the slides don't actually expand that way.
Right, right, right. Well, I don't. I don't know how slide machines works. I only used one time, and that was a long time ago. But you're dealing with 35 millimeter film, so the advantage of film over like digital is that if you have the right film, you can get very close and get very much detail. So technically, you could do that. I'm not saying that it couldn't be done. I'm just saying it felt a lot like Blade Runner.
It did have some Blade Runner kind of vibes to it,
Right, right,
but
right.
But how did you like? I know we talked about how grotesque the dog is, with the dog and everything. Now she's all of a sudden back over to where the detectives are, and now she's having to remove her clothes and everything. And now she winds up becoming fall victim to the Candyman. And of course, no one's believing her or anything like that. They want to lock her up into a mental institution. Of course, that's okay with the husband because now we can actually sleep with the girl that he's been wanting to sleep with. And if you
Right, right.
remember, Helen does wind up escaping, and then she winds up seeing what's actually going on.
Right. Her escape was badass. See, it's basically with that first murder, you kind of realize like she wakes up, like she says Candyman's name 5 times. He visits her, and then she blacks out. And then when she wakes up, she's not holding a bloody knife, but she's near a bloody knife. There's a decapitated dog, and then she goes into the other room. The woman is crying because her baby is missing because she's in some woman's apartment, and the dog that's dead is her dog. And you mentioned her name earlier. I can't remember, but the woman came because they met earlier. So it's like she's bewildered why she's in this woman's house. Why is her dog dead at her feet? And then the woman is charging at her because her baby is missing. And now she thinks that she has to defend herself against this woman. So she's holding this knife and she's waving the knife and she cuts the woman. And then the police burst in because the woman had already called the police. So she doesn't believe she killed this dog. She thinks that she woke up at a murder scene. But I think it's at this point you kind of realize what it means to be a victim of the Candyman.
Exactly. But also, too, if I woke up and there's a knife on the floor, and then this woman that you met hours beforehand, which is Anne Marie, and, you know, you're in her apartment, basically you kind of on the fence of breaking and entering whenever you're not realizing that why what you're doing there in the first place. I would not be picking up that knife and trying to stab somebody because that's not self-defense. That is literally trying to kill that person while she's inside that same apartment complex. That's what I got out of it.
Right, killing somebody in her own home. I understand why she picked up the knife. Like she woke up, she heard somebody screaming, so she felt like because she didn't know what she was at
Mm.
first, so she felt like maybe somebody's coming after me. Like if somebody's screaming, then maybe they are being attacked too, right? So she wakes up, maybe somebody's being attacked, so she got the knife maybe to defend herself from the attacker. Come to find out, she's probably the attacker. she she probably did it.
And then, after that winds up happening, like I said, then Triffer bails her out of jail, and then Helen finds Candyman in a photographic slide, like we mentioned. And then after that, a month later, psychiatrist Dr. Brooke interviews Helen to prepare her for her upcoming trial. She attempts to prove her innocence by summoning the Candyman, who appears and murders Dr. Brooke, allowing her to escape despite being framed for Brooke's murder, like you mentioned.
Right.
Then she
Oh, that
returns. Yeah.
yeah, that was funny because that was the first time. I think that's the first and only time that Candyman personally murdered somebody, and it was gruesome.
It was that was intense. I'm not
Yeah,
gonna lie.
yeah. You don't see much. Basically, he rams his hook into the guy's back, but just the motion and all the gurgling and the blood splatter that was pretty gnarly. And then when he goes out the window, it's like he flies backwards out the window. That was spectacular.
And then you see a bunch of bees fall, like he just transformed into a bunch of bees as he actually goes out the window, which I thought was actually pretty cool on how they actually did that. For that special effects back in '92, that was actually top notch back then for what they
Right.
did.
Yeah, it
So,
was spectacular. And
but
like I said,
then,
oh, go
oh,
ahead.
no, 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 go on ahead. Uh, but no, going ahead. You were going to say something.
Hello.
Going ahead. I know that you were going to say something.
No, I was just going to say that I mentioned earlier that her escape was spectacular. How it was almost James Bondian and how she got out. She goes out the window, she's crawling on the building, and then she forces her way back into the building, attacked this other person. This one she did kill, or I think she attacked her some kind of way and took her clothes, and then pretended to be a nurse or an orderly and escaped out the building that way. So she was made of sterner stuff, escaping in that way.
Most definitely. And then, of course, this is also another thing too that winds up happening. So Helen confronts Cabrini Green to rescue Anthony when she finds the Candyman in his lair. He tells her that surrendering to him will ensure Anthony's safety. Offering Helen immunity, the Candyman opens his coat, revealing a rib cage withered in bees. Now, this is where everybody talks about that this was actually real bees that they use for
Yeah,
this.
that's spectacular. I didn't know if they were real or not. All I know is I don't know how I could be an actor or a stunt person standing still as bees are flying over me. But there was a show. There were lots of shows, but there's one show in particular I used to watch. It's called That's Incredible, and they would show incredible stuff that people did, stunts and whatnot. So one of the things that they showed were like guys that were on the Guinness Book of World Records for having the most amount of bees that covered their body. So it's not like it's impossible. I just don't want to be that person having bees crawling all over me.
Same here. That's like the last thing I want. If that was the case, I need a higher paycheck if I'm gonna do that
Right,
because I know I don't want none of that. That's for sure.
right.
And I have to give credit to Tony Todd for wanting to do that, though.
So he did do that. That was him with actual bees crawling on his face.
Yeah,
That's crazy. I couldn't.
I couldn't do that either. Like
Right.
it's like, well, guess what we're gonna do today, sir? What's that? Well, get some honey, get some bees, because guess what? You're gonna be wrapped up in bees today. I'm like, well, my 2 o'clock is about to open, so I'm gonna go this way, and that's gonna be the end of me. So yeah,
Right. Yeah, that's wow. That because it looked real. I was like, wow, those bees look real. They can't be real though. These are great special effects.
but don't forget though, during 1992, we didn't really have a green screen or anything like that, so they had to shoot for a practical, you know.
Right. Right.
So, whew, that
Well,
just makes my skin crawl.
I imagine they would do something like have like they would probably make a bunch of tiny like what do you call those things? Like I don't know, model bees, tiny model bees, and they will paste them on his face, and they would kind of move the camera in a certain way where it looks like the bees are moving or whatever, or maybe they'd get a body double, and they would have a real close up on his jawline where you can see the body double actually has the bees on his face, and then when you pull back, you see the fake bees on Tony Todd's face. I buy that. I don't want to see real bees on somebody's face.
I don't either. I'd rather just, hey, I give them 100% for being dedicated, but no, that's not going to happen to me. I just want a stunt person to go in my place for that.
Right.
But, um, but no. Then of course, after that winds up happening, he pours out of his mouth and kisses her and stream down her throat. He vanishes with Anthony, and Helen awakes to discover a mural of the Candyman and his lover, who bears striking resemblance to her. Then the Candyman releases Anthony, and Helen helps him strike fear into the Cabrini Green residents, attempting to feed his legend. So, what did you think about the whole bonfire thing and about how she was taking the baby because the baby was in the fire?
Right.
She was trying to rescue the baby.
Right. Yeah. So we saw them building the bonfire. So in Cabrini Green, they had built this like structure. It's basically just a bunch of a wooden junk that the residents had piled up into this huge pile. And she had asked earlier, "What's that for?" And they said, I think the little boy told her it was for the bonfire. So they was gonna have a bonfire for some reason. It's kind of weird, some kind of weird Candyman tradition because they believed in him. That he kept talking about his congregation, and the residents were his congregation. They were the ones that really believed in him, and he basically needed Helen to commit these murders to bolster that belief. So they built the structure, and then for what that I guess he felt that Helen's commitment might be wavering or something. So he took the baby that he kidnapped from this other woman and he put that baby in the middle of this wooden structure. And then the residents, not knowing there's a baby in there, they set it on fire. And so now Helen not want to see this baby burn and feeling probably guilty for killing this baby's mother's dog and attacking his mother. She felt guilty, so she goes in to the bonfire, not wanting to sacrifice his baby and getting burnt, but rescuing the baby. So that was a pretty cool act of heroism, and I like how it's like basically she perishes rescuing this baby. So that kind of elevates the movie into something more than just plain horror.
Exactly, and it also gives Helen a chance to actually have some redeemable qualities about her, in a sense to where it's like, okay, the story winded up ruining her life, but now she has a way to redeem it by trying to rescue this baby and not make it the focus of her story anymore.
Yeah,
So that's what I got out of it. And then, of course, she winds up rescuing the baby. But I'm also thinking, too, with the baby, I wonder if that was actually Candyman's way of trying to sacrifice the baby so that way the baby can live on through a new version of Candyman since we actually got that reboot now. That's how I'm looking at it now. But I could be wrong. But that's just me looking at it through the reboot lens as well.
yeah, I'm not
But
sure. It seemed to me that Candyman really wanted to burn that baby, and he was upset that Helen tried to rescue the baby, and then she ended up basically being part of the whatever you would call the spirit that Candyman is. She became a similar type of spirit. Now she also has become legend, and an effigy at the end of the movie. See an effigy of her, well, not an effigy, but a painting of her burning in fire, and she's part of that myth now. She's part of the Candyman myth. And apparently that's what, as far as this first movie is concerned, that's what he wanted all along. Or at least that was one of the things he wanted. He also wanted to burn that baby. I can't, maybe because that would be that would be their child. That could be it. He wanted the Candyman family that goes around murdering peoples with hooks. That could be it.
right. But I'll tell you what else was really creepy for me as a kid was seeing him crash through the mirrors and you see the hook that part still gets me every single time for that jump scare. And I know it's going to happen, but yet, because it's this very still silence, because there's no background music or anything like that, it's just very still silence. And then all of a sudden you see the hand pop out with the hook and trying to get at Helen. I thought that scene still haunts me now today.
Yeah, that was a very good jump scare because this movie has almost no jump scares. I think that was the only one really, and it got me. It looked like a giant hook. I might be
Yeah,
misremembering it, but it looked like a giant hook comes out the bathroom mirror and is trying to get Helen. It's like because sometimes he's chasing Helen, and sometimes he's trying to convince Helen to be his victim, but he doesn't explain what that means. And I think what it means is he's um he's basically using Helen to commit these murders for him, and I think that bolsters her belief in him. It's different from or other horror movies in that Scream came close when it says like the call is coming from inside the house, but in Candyman, it's not that the killer is inside the house making phone calls. You are the killer. You are the one perpetrating these crimes. You can't just wake up
it's
with a bloody knife or wake up in a puddle of blood and somebody's dead next to you and think that you're not somehow involved. So that's basically what happened.
exactly. And then, of course, you wind up seeing Trevor saying Helen's name in the mirror, and he winds up getting killed by Helen. And of course, it's like a burnt up corpse of Helen. Which to me, I was thinking to myself, okay, is this anything to do with the Bloody Mary urban legend, where you say Bloody Mary 5 times and Bloody Mary pops up behind you? So that's another thing I was thinking of as a kid was the Bloody Mary urban legend. Whenever I
Right.
saw Helen,
Oh, and also the gag is like at this time he's fully living with his new girlfriend, and it's not that Helen kills him, but he kills him through the new girlfriend. So now the girlfriend wakes up with a bloody knife and covered in blood, being accused of killing her brand new professor boyfriend, who was killed by Helen. So yeah, that was actually pretty good.
it definitely was. I still have fun watching this movie. I have to watch it at least once a year for Halloween and stuff like that, just to get some spooky vibes. Although Farewell to the Flesh does a good job because it's centered around New Orleans and stuff like that with voodoo and things like that. So that's something else that I really appreciate with Farewell to the Flesh. So that's another one of my favorite Candyman movies.
Right, I'll probably have to check that out. This overall, this movie was not that bad. It wasn't as bad as I thought it was gonna be because I don't remember it being, like, thoroughly impressed by it or all that scared by it, but upon the second viewing, it really was a decent movie. I felt like if it had a better director,
Mhm.
who could have raised the suspense, because what this movie really needed was the type of suspense you get from watching something like Silence of the Lambs. If it had that level of suspense, then I think that this could have been one of the greatest movies of all time.
I think so too. I think this could have actually been a to be honest with you, I think it could have actually been bigger than what it needed to be. If it would just had. Here's the thing: this movie is also has more of a detective vibe from it than it does an actual horror aspect to it. Because, like you said, this is more of Helen investigating the urban legend of the Candyman, and then of course you wind up having Candyman come in the middle of your film versus it being in the first 5-10 minutes. So
Right.
it has like a very slow pace, slow build, which is something I like. I like slow tension and slow build, which is why I like the Conjuring films with the first two films. But this one to me is just it's pretty good in my opinion, but it could have been better.
Right, right. It didn't I don't mind a slow build myself. But yeah, but the reason that you have a slow build is to build tension and to have a satisfying release of that tension. And when you have that, then what you have on your hands is a very good film. So this movie was right on the cusp of being great. It's like it was missing. It was like you're eating a meal and the meal is missing something. It's like, oh yeah, I know what it is. It's salt. If it just had a little bit more salt, or just a little, if it had hot peppers or something like that. Is so I'm not like a professional film critic or a filmmaker, so I
Yeah,
couldn't tell you what was missing, but I know that there's something is missing. I know what I'd like.
exactly. That's you know what? I'm not a film critic either. I'm a film reviewer, so there's a difference between movie critics and film reviewers. So that's what I am. So, but yeah, I can definitely when you know that something is just bland and it needs a little bit something added onto it to maybe extend a certain scenes or whatever to give it a cutting edge, then yeah, you know for a fact that once that tension's released, it's there. But for this one, it's not there for you the way that you wanted it to be. So I totally understand where you're coming from. And I just want to tell everybody this too. This movie only had a budget of $8 to $9 million. It also made 25.8 million at the box office.
Yeah, hence the sequel. And hence the attempt to the actually it had multiple sequels, like you mentioned one, but there must have been like four. And I think most of them went to DVD. And then you have this new film that just came out. So yeah, there have been people they've been trying to revive and rework the Candyman mythos from for a long time. This movie would probably work well as a television anthology where the Candyman it appears in every episode some kind of way, or one of his prodigy like the Burning Helen or something. So
Burning
yeah,
Helen,
yeah,
Candyman, Burning Helen.
right, right. Somebody trips up and says Helen instead of Candyman, and then she shows
Right?
up. So yeah, the bald headed, badly burned Helen shows up in your window or your mirror, and then next thing you know, you're committing crimes.
Exactly. But the two films, this one and Farewell to the Flesh, were both in theatrical versions. It's just that Candyman Day of the Dead, which is the third film that I said that I didn't really like, was a straight to DVD release. And I remember renting that at Blockbuster and being very disappointed. So,
Right.
but I rented the first two films and I really love those. But so I do appreciate you being on the show tonight and talking about Candyman. I can't wait to do more stuff with you. I had a blast doing Short Circuit with you and stuff like that. So I can't wait to go back and listen to your podcast and of course being on your podcast as well. And don't worry, there's going to be plenty of times whenever I'm going to have you back over here as well.
Thanks, I really appreciate it. This is my first live appearance, so this is awesome. That's why I put on my glasses. I was like, "Oh, I want to look good for this."
Hey, you're looking fly, man. You're looking fly. I gotta tell you.
Right, right.
but, but dude, it's a pleasure. If you want to follow Zoe, all his stuff will be in the description box below. Don't forget to smash that like button. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Don't forget, we're actually doing our Game of Thrones House of the Dragon review on Wednesday nights now, 8 o'clock Central Time, 9 o'clock Eastern Time. Then we're following it up with The Lost Boys at 9 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time and 10 o'clock, well, not, well, let me say this: 9 o'clock Central Time, 10 o'clock Eastern Time is when we're going to be doing the Lost Boys review, and that's going to be on Thursday night. So go on ahead, tune in for that. And don't forget, we also have our She-Hulk review, but that's going to be postponed until the week after next because we're going to be doing our Cobra Kai spoiler review on Friday. So always until next time, guys, it's been real, it's been fun. Stay safe out there, and bye-bye.